Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm, as always, your host, Tiger Paul Craven. We got a ton to get into tonight. A couple topics me and Jordan want to talk about tonight. A little bit about our depth going into 2024, the transfer portal, obviously, some scholarship numbers and stuff that pertain to that. So a little bit of football talk tonight. I'm sure we will hit at basketball at some point. I see some basketball comments in the comment section already. Clemson has not been playing well as of late on that side of the coin, I guess you could say. But it's par for the course for Clemson basketball, in my opinion. But let me go ahead and give a shout out to the comment section real quick before we get into today's show. And before I do that, I almost forgot. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. It really does help out. It's much appreciated. Me and Jordan trying to grow this show that we do here, the All In Show, right here. So bring some more people in, help us out with that. Also hit that like button. This is a live video, so that always helps as well. And then we also have the super chat feature that you could utilize to support the show in that way. Any and all support is much appreciated. But tonight so far, we got Frank Craven. in the chat section right now. Thank you so much for getting in here. Benny Weathers is in here. John Serane's in here. Not Me is in here. Taco Gaming 75. Good to see all of you fine individuals in here tonight to chop it up about Clemson football in what some college football fans would call the offseason. But again, this is just the point of the season, in my opinion, where we don't play games. So, ton to talk about tonight. So, without further ado, let me bring on my co-host, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing awesome. Just kind of settling into the official flow of the off season. I'm really sad that football is over. But it's kind of been hard to just sit down and take a breath because every 5 seconds some news pops up on my phone related to the transfer portal, coaching changes, all of that. So there's never a dull moment in college football. It's a crazy sport, but other than that, had a pretty good week. I'm a little bit hungry because I rushed to get home and didn't get dinner beforehand. So that's great. But other than that, I'm feeling good.
That's good. That should keep us on schedule tonight, maybe.
Hopefully.
You know how we struggle with that sort of thing
Yeah.
on this show.
Yeah, we
so, but yeah, man, it's glad to see that your week is going well. Mine has as well, man. It's been crazy busy. I didn't pop on here until like I don't know, a couple minutes to 7. So got the show set up really quickly, and
so we were both racing against time.
hit the intro, and here we sit. But we got 17 people in the live chat section right now. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Again, really do appreciate it. Hit that like button while you're in here. Those of you that may be new to the channel or new to just this show on the channel, me and Jordan do this show every Thursday at 7 p.m. Year round. So whether we're playing games or we're not, we are doing this show. And we got a ton to talk about tonight, Jordan. So let's just go ahead and hop into the show. First thing I wanted to talk about was, Clemson's scholarship numbers as we sit Thursday, January 18th, 2024, and kind of what those numbers look like for Clemson. And to be honest, we're kind of right at our 85 scholarship number right now. If you include the entire 2024 class, including some of those late offensive linemen that we added late in the cycle before early signing period, and then just all the ones that have committed and signed so far, all the people coming back, including, the NFL, all the 7 transfers that left Clemson after the 2023 season. Right now, we're sitting at 85 scholarships. So what that tells you is we don't necessarily have room to offer further scholarships via the transfer portal. So what's kind of your take on Clemson's management of the roster to this point, and how that may be affecting some of the angles that they're taking in the transfer portal, or some of the angles that they took in the transfer portal a little bit earlier in this cycle?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like especially when it comes to that number, we're at 85 right now, and you could technically say, depending on one particular player, where you could say we're at 86
Yep.
if you include Paul Tyson, who they're kind of holding as in sort of a break glass in case of emergency type of guy. So whether he counts towards the scholarship numbers is kind of yet to be determined. David Hood posted an article about it earlier today. So it's funny because I always like looking at shout out to Morgan Thomas over on the Roar. He does those scholarship charts, and his a while back had us at 84. So now we're right at the number. There's not really any room to take a guy right now. And so that's kind of where we are. But I think the management of the roster to this point, I think has honestly, I wouldn't point to roster management as the issue so far, this year. I mean, part of the reason you're at the number is because a guy like Barrett Carter decides to come back, which, you didn't necessarily expect to have going into the last, really going into the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, I mean, that's, it's kind of corny when Dabo says, oh, well, that a guy coming back for his senior year is basically a 5-star transfer portal get. But, in that sense, it kind of is. But it does leave you with a lot of questions about, well, we don't have any room to take a portal guy right now. No one is leaving right now. The window to enter the portal has closed, or it will be closed. It will be closing soon. And so now we're at hold on, it is closed. It is closed. And so now
Yes.
we're at a point where, you kind of are where you are right now, and any potential portal activity will very likely, have to be in the spring, in that spring window. So now we're kind of in wait and see mode, and the roster kind of is what it is heading into spring. So that's kind of where we are. I don't know if they're really intending on using that spring portal window as an opportunity. I would hope so, because I think you will see guys leave. That's kind of what the spring is nowadays. It's kind of a weed out sort of period where you kind of find out, who am I going to have for fall, and who am I going to have into the season. And so guys kind of figure out where they are in the depth chart. So I would imagine there would be some exits, which I guess in that sense, I think being right at the number sets you up well to have an opportunity to get, take a portal take or two, maybe, just depending on how many guys exit, because I definitely expect there to be some.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a lot of good points there. And, your last point when talking about the portal is particularly interesting, because we are just right at that 85 scholarship number. Whereas if you rewind back to this time, 2023, heading into that offseason, we were over the scholarship number because we had several people come back that were not expected to come back. An Xavier Thomas, a Tyler Davis, a Ruka Justin Maskell, those type of players came back, and they weren't necessarily anticipated to come back. Although we were happy, obviously, to have those guys back. They definitely contributed in a big way to the 2023 Clemson team. It wasn't expected. So Clemson was in a pretty tough, predicament when it came to scholarship numbers and roster management going into last offseason. And you remember Dabo even caught some criticism because a possible solution was mentioned that some guys that were former walk-ons would lose their scholarships in order
to make common
room.
Practice that across college football, but because Dabo said it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dabo is just one of those polarizing coaches that really, no matter, I think, what he says, it's just kind of who he is. And people like to latch on to certain things that Dabo says, and they just kind of run with them. And it kind of just grows its own life when it comes to, Twitter and the college football media and all that kind of stuff. But I think Clemson sits in a pretty good place with 85 scholarship players heading into the offseason, heading into spring practice, right? We know spring is basically a time for players to reflect, to gauge where they are on a depth chart. And if they don't like it, they're going to leave. They're going to hop in the transfer portal, and they're going to look somewhere else where they can get an opportunity for maybe a bit more playing time. So with that said, Clemson being at the exact 85 scholarship number, I think sets up pretty well for Clemson to add maybe, a player or two or three via the transfer portal in that, April timeframe, once the portal opens back up again and you see some attrition, because I don't believe every player on Clemson roster heading into spring practice will be on there come April timeframe when that portal opens again and there's an opportunity to go seek playing time elsewhere. So that's going to open up, several roster spots there, several scholarship spots that Clemson could then go and maybe fill some holes that they have on the roster heading out of spring practice. And I think that's particularly important for this Clemson team because you do have a new coach in Chris Rumpf. You do have a new coach in Matt Luke, who really just need an opportunity to evaluate what they have in the room right now. I know everybody looks at the transfer portal and we're like, I wish Clemson would just use it a little bit so it could almost stop being a negative story brought up constantly in the national media about Clemson and their lack of use. So I think some Clemson fan, like me in particular, I'm not a proponent of Clemson needs to go out and treat the transfer portal like a lot of these universities do. A Florida State and, just to mention one in our own conference, right? I'm not a proponent of that whatsoever. But I think it is a good tool to use if we find ourselves at the end of spring practice. Hey, we got a couple roster or a couple groups on our roster that, maybe not quite where we want them to be. Let's go grab a guy here, grab a guy there, right? But again, we have to let those new coaches get in there, learn their players, actually evaluate. They've only practiced with these players, maybe 10 times at this point. They don't really know what they have. So I think spring will allow those new coaches to really evaluate what they have in the offensive line group and the defensive end group, and then maybe make some adjustments post-spring when there probably be a couple roster spots that open up.
Absolutely. I mean, and you and I are in total agreement. I mean, I don't think, and I think most Clemson fans are probably in the same camp of, well, yeah, we don't want to be a team that goes out and recruits over its roster every single offseason with the portal, and it's just a all out spending spree. I don't think Clemson is in the position to do that to begin with, but still, like we don't want them to do that, even if they were, because I do believe in still the recruiting apparatus at Clemson and the type of talent they're bringing in. And I just, I still think the way to ultimately the way to succeed is through the high school ranks. So, if you're constantly, recruiting over those guys with portal guys that are, some of them maybe you do land with multiple years of eligibility, but those are few and far between versus the 1 year, the one and done guys that come in and then they give you good production for a year and then they're gone. And then now you're in the same position you were when before you got them. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. So I'm just not, you and I, we're just not, in the position where Clemson needs to do that. And so I do think this does set up well. I guess the only downside to not being able to utilize and dip into the portal right now is if you guys haven't been paying attention to what's been going on in Tuscaloosa, Alabama over the last week or so, it's been a pretty shocking exodus, so to speak, over there. We expected defections. Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time. We talked about it. We knew there was going to be some pretty significant effects, but there are some really impact, like talented players, some of whom Clemson was very much involved with in their high school recruitments that are entering the portal, and probably more to come. Obviously, that's an opportunity right there that you probably won't be able to take advantage of, that you've seen a team like Georgia, who you play week one, is taking advantage of. They took Travaris Robinson from Alabama off of their defensive coaching staff, and now they're the heavy favorite to land Caleb Downs, probably the best safety in the country, and probably Alabama's best player at his position. Those kind of things, you're like, oh, well, it'd be nice if we could pick up, say, he hasn't entered the portal, but say like a Jihad Campbell, who was a former Clemson commit. Obviously, when Brent Venables left, he and two other commits, decommitted and went elsewhere. But he's a guy that I think you could circle back around on. And he's not a guy that's just, oh, we were in on him, but he hasn't played much. He's a guy that played a good bit this past season and showed a lot of promise as a pass rusher and could be a solution at edge. I'm not saying, again, he hasn't entered the portal, so that's just a pipe dream at this point, but you're not in a position to really take advantage of that. So I guess that would be the only downside, is there's a massive pool of talent that is being influxed from one team into the portal. and you won't be able to take advantage of that. But that's but I think you're still in a good spot,
Yeah.
and I still think that this sets up well if you have needs after spring to be able to go get them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's going to end up in a positive direction for Clemson from where we sit right now. I know, like you mentioned, it's frustrating several Clemson fans, and there's obviously the huge narrative that we already hit on about Clemson, or more accurately, Dabo Sweeney doesn't use the transfer portal. He doesn't like NIL. He doesn't like the transfer portal. He doesn't want college players getting any money. He wants to have his roster locked down and them not to be able to go anywhere, and all this stuff, right? All the narratives are out there. They're going to be out there, true or not. They're going to be out there, right? And it is going to frustrate some fans right now that you see Florida State, and you mentioned Florida State and Georgia, two opponents that Clemson has on the schedule for the 2024 season, and they're just cherry picking that Alabama roster right now. They're just pulling players left and right, and just kind of beefing up their rosters. But again, um, it's just a different mentality on how to build a team. They just go about it a different way, and I understand that some people don't necessarily like the way that Dabo goes about it. But again, if you look at Clemson's roster, it's not devoid of talent. There's a ton of talent on there right now. I would like for us to be able to target some of these Alabama players right now. But at the end of the day, I know people don't like to hear it, but we're at 85 scholarships right now as we sit. You can't just anticipate that you're going to have two people leave via the transfer portal in April. Because if you bring on these Alabama players right now, what happens if they don't? Right? Like what happens when you don't have any transfers, right? So you can't really play with numbers in that way, or kind of roll the dice on stuff like that. So there's just, unfortunately for Clemson, there's no roster spots right now, or better yet, not roster spots, scholarship spots to offer one of those Alabama players, that we may be interested in or may not be interested in, whatever the case may be. So, again, it's uncomfortable right now, but I think Clemson ends up in a good place come post spring practice, where there will probably be, like I said earlier, a couple transfers, and you'll have a couple scholarships open up that you could divvy out in either the transfer portal or some other way.
Yeah, I agree. And again, that's not if I could make the decision. Obviously, I would love for Clemson to have been able to utilize this portal window, at least to some degree. And they tried. So I'll commend them for that at least. But I still think there's, it's not the end of the world, and I think you'll have an opportunity later on to evaluate your roster. And I think honestly, when you go through spring, you could be in a better position to truly evaluate what you have and kind of tailor who you go after in the portal towards those needs. Because right now, Clemson was kind of going off of, well, we saw what we saw during the season and during bowl practices, but we don't have the true freshman class that are going to be here, especially the early enrollees. So you'll be able to see them as well and see how they fit in with the roster and see where they are. Because, hey, who knows? Maybe when it comes to edge, maybe Darian Mayo comes in, is a guy that just wows people immediately and looks ready to play, which I think is totally possible. And then all of a sudden, your depth is looking a little bit different. Maybe AJ Hoffler takes that next step as a redshirt freshman, and he looks like a guy that can contribute. Maybe you see more out of Cade Denhoff. Maybe Zaire Patterson really finally puts it together, and then all of a sudden, okay, we're in a pretty good shape at defensive end, because it's not a numbers issue; it's a proven production outside of TJ Parker issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, all of a sudden you're like, well, maybe we don't really need a portal edge. We have guys that we think can play right now, that are already on the roster. And then things look a little bit different on the offensive line. Say, I don't know, a guy who's gotten a lot of praise over the last couple of weeks at some of these high school all-star performances. Elijah Thurman, um, he's been like shooting up a lot of people's boards so far, over the past couple of weeks for kind of his performances, and like maybe he comes in and there's a guy like, okay, maybe we don't need maybe we are in better shape on the interior than we thought we were, and then all of a sudden you're in a different position. So the spring does give you a little bit more clarity as far as where you are roster wise to make better decisions if you decide to go into the portal. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think,
and obviously that's a positive spin on it, but I think there's a lot of positives to waiting and for the spring to really evaluate and figure out what you want to do portal wise.
yeah, absolutely. Big Mick brings up a good point. We'll hit some comments while we're talking about this before we move on to kind of our depth chart situation and stuff like that. Says, what happens when you bring in transfers and all players you have been developing jump into the portal? Yeah, I mean,
that's the risk. I mean, and I think, you can't always, eschew the portal in the hopes of not hurting anybody's feelings, because I do think if you have a need and you feel like you have a guy that can fit that that can fill that need in the portal, and a guy you've locked in on, and you're like, okay, he could help us, then you go get him. So I think it's kind of a balancing act. You have to be wary of your roster and what that can do, but you can't be scared to hurt people's feelings if you bring in somebody. Like if you feel like you have a guy that you think fits what you want to be, schematically, production wise, from a culture standpoint, go get them. Because I just that. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, and I don't think Clemson's coaching staff would ever approach it from a place of protecting someone's feelings.
Right.
Obviously, they're in it to win games. They're in it to play for championships, and you have to put the best player on the field in order to do that. So I think if they truly thought that there was somebody that could come in and immediately contribute to this team, they would absolutely do it. Should they have the roster spot to do it? John Sarin makes an additional point to that makes a lot of sense in my mind. He says that's the problem some schools face. 1 leads to 2, 2 leads to 4, 4 leads to 8, etc. And then you're on a merry-go-round. It's tough to stop the ride. And that's a place where I think it's a good point, because I think there's some schools that are probably there already and some schools that are pretty close to being there. You think about what happened to Florida State during this bowl season with all of their, transfer portal players that decided to either opt out for the NFL or move on, or whatever the case may be, individual basis, whatever reasonings they had, regardless. And then you see them this season again, heavily going into that transfer portal to build another roster. And I think it's a tough place to build a roster from consistently, I think, for a college football team. And that's kind of, I think, just to point out a team in our conference, Florida State, that, that's a team that's kind of doing it that way, kind of living year to year on a roster. You never really know what it's going to look like. And then they get into the transfer portal season, and then, they get a bunch of players, and you're like, oh, okay, they're going to be pretty good this year. But again, not a place I would want to be in every single offseason, where I'm looking for, 10 to 15 transfer portals to really build a legitimate roster heading into the next season. I wouldn't want to be in a place like that.
Me neither. And, you bring up Florida State, and I think it's interesting because Florida State actually put together a really nice high school recruiting class this year. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really interested to see, no matter what happens after next season, kind of their kind of strategy of, bringing in guys from the portal as well. Are they going to hold on to some of those guys? Because, it's not, they signed a really good class, but when you go through the season and then, you come to the end of the year and Florida State is already, they're going and shopping around in the portal and to, fill needs and get proven production. All of a sudden that star-studded true freshman class you brought in, maybe they start looking elsewhere, and maybe they jump into the portal. So I'm really interested to see how that happens, because I think that's going to be kind of tell me where they are from a culture standpoint, under Mike Norvell. Because if it's, it's great to say, it's great that they have upped their recruiting, their high school recruiting, but you're constantly bringing in guys every single year. Like, are they trying to build towards the point where they, kind of do what Georgia and some of the bigger programs have done, where it's like, okay, we're not going to dive headfirst in the portal. We'll bring in guys here or there. Or is it, are they just going to continue to, they're going to bring in guys from the high school ranks, but if they find a guy that's better in the transfer portal, they're just going to bring him in. And
right.
And then all of a sudden you're still in the same position where you're living year to year. So
yeah.
I'm really interested to see how that kind of plays out.
Yeah, and it feels like eventually you got to build into, leaning less on the portal, leaning more on high school recruiting, just to have sustained success. I mean, it seems very difficult to live by the portal every single offseason and parlay that into multi-year success.
Especially
not saying it can't be done, because I mean, the portal's still fairly new in the model that we have right now. So maybe that theory that I have is going to be proven wrong eventually, but I just don't see it being a sustainable way to consistently build a college football roster.
Right. And especially in the 12-team playoff era, because I think, if Florida, Clemson is in the same boat. I mean, Clemson, Florida State have the same aspirations, obviously, from a program standpoint. But if you want to, the 12-team playoff means, you're going to be playing, you're going to have to win 3-4 games, to win a national championship. Against teams that are, comparably or more talented than you. And that really tests kind of your depth. And kind of what you saw this year with Florida State was, they had a really good starting, 22. They had depth in some places, but kind of saw when, when key guys started to go out, all of a sudden they didn't look anywhere close to kind of what, some of the other programs that were especially in the college football playoff were. Obviously Georgia had guys, opt out, but their second and third and fourth stringers, look a lot better, because there are most of those guys are guys that Georgia brought in through the high school ranks, developed, and, there's transfers here or there, but, the majority of that roster and the majority of the guys that they relied on this year were guys that they brought in through the high school ranks, had been there, multiple years, stuff like that. And that's kind of how you build, true depth. And that's why Georgia is where they are as a program, because they've, and kind of, that's what Alabama always did. And, Clemson, for a time was pretty similar. Like they brought in guys, and they developed the depth that they had. And obviously the transfer portal era has made that more difficult, but that's still ultimately the path to success and to being a true national championship contender, and not a guy that just gets to not a program that just gets to the playoff and gets bounced out in the first round because you don't have the depth that the team you're facing does. So that's
right. That's
kind of the balance, and that I'm interested from. This isn't a Florida State show, but obviously they're our main competition within the ACC. So it's always interesting to kind of see what they're doing, but how they managed all of that, because I think that's what Clemson has done at a really high level for a long time under Dabo, and are trying to do that in an era where it's become more difficult. But ultimately, the teams that are winning national championships are the ones that did it. Michigan is another example. I mean, Michigan just won the national championship this year.
Yep.
Most of the guys that they relied on this year, they had transfers here or there, but the majority of that roster was guys that they brought in through the high school ranks and developed. And Michigan is a team that wasn't recruiting top 5 classes every year. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of more of a Clemson model. Clemson never really recruited, at a top 5 level until after they won 2 national championships. So that's still ultimately the way to succeed in this era.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's the way for sustained success, and that's really what any college football fan base I think is looking for. Just to wrap up this transfer portal point, and then we'll move on to some other things we want to talk about tonight. But Alex Gaming gets in here. Part of the problem is being able to recruit the transfer portal.
Yeah.
You have to have money, and the player transfer one because staff changes or they will want playing time. Yeah. So the big thing I think there that he mentioned is one, yes, you have to have money.
Yeah.
Two, you have to almost guarantee playing time, it seems. And those are two very difficult things um, to kind of guarantee because I'm not one of these people that think that you should just be blindly guaranteeing most people playing time. Now there's obviously players out there in the portal every year that you can clearly see like, okay, yeah, this dude obviously he's going to start for us if we can land him. But again, I think that's part of what the Clemson coaching staff is starting to learn a little bit is the portal transfers and the portal recruiting, if you will, is vastly different than the high school recruiting scene that they're so well versed in and very good at working and bringing in really good recruiting classes. The portal's completely different most of the time. Now there's outliers everywhere on either side of it, but most of the time it's about two things: how much money can you give me, and what's my playing time going to look like? Those are the two questions that you're often going to get asked. And if they don't hear what they want to hear, they're going to walk away and go to another school that is either going to give them the dollar figure they want or give them the guaranteed playing time that they want. So it's a
Yep.
different animal in the portal to recruit.
And this will, and it kind of leads into a conversation that we don't really dive into too much. Well, but we'll have to have a segment about it, one show or something, just because I think there's been a lot of questions about Clemson's NIL situation and kind of how they how it's structured, how they use their NIL funds and stuff like that. So I mean that'd be a fun thing to hope. Fun might be a strong word, but it might be an interesting thing to dive into at some point because there have been, over the last week, some interesting numbers about how Clemson's collectives and now singular collective have been using their funds and how much money Clemson was actually investing as far as NIL was concerned. Also, on a kind of sort of related note, Levon Kirkland just got hired to the name, image, and likeness staff as a coordinator. So it was reported like last month that Levon Kirkland would be joining the Clemson program in some form or fashion. So now we know what it actually is.
Okay.
So that's really cool. Levon Kirkland, one of the greatest linebackers in school history. Played for Danny Ford, Ken Hatfield. He and Will Vandervoort do a great podcast. I don't know if you any of you guys listening, you should go check them out. Levon does a really great job, and love listening to him because he's just has a wealth of knowledge as far as Clemson football is concerned. It's a really good podcast, so I would suggest giving those guys a listen too. But I wanted to kind of bring that up a little bit because I thought that was cool.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Glad to see a guy like Levon Kirkland, come aboard. I mean, just a huge name out there when you're thinking about Clemson football and having him on the NIL team. Hopefully that translates into some bigger things for Clemson to do in that department. But I think we'll leave the intricacies of the NIL for maybe another week's a week show that we can kind of deep dive into it and kind of look at the true numbers that obviously are somewhat reported, somewhat not reported, and get into how Clemson uses that in a later video. But speaking of the transfer portal and all that stuff, let's go ahead and transition to the depth chart for Clemson. Right, that's kind of where all this stuff stems from.
Yep.
Any sort of transfer portal talk, any sort of roster gap talk, all originates with the depth chart. And part of where we're at with a full 85 scholarship players is what you mentioned earlier on in the show with a guy like Barrett Carter returning for his senior season. Something that if you would have asked probably both of us going into the 2023 season, we would have probably told you guaranteed Jeremiah Trotter's gone and Barrett Carter's gone, just out of the linebacker group. And clearly we were wrong. Yes, Jeremiah Trotter declared for the NFL draft, but Barrett Carter's coming back for his senior season. I did not think that was going to happen going into last season. But again, here we sit, and I'm happy. Like like that's awesome that Barrett Carter's coming back. But again, so for you, looking at the Clemson roster, knowing what we saw in the 2023 season, knowing what we have coming in the 2024 season, just heading into spring practice before that gets truly ramped up. What are your kind of immediate thoughts on Clemson's depth chart? What position groups jump out to you as either a strength or a weakness, or some need there that's a possibility? Kind of heading into spring practice.
Well, I think we have to start with quarterback. I think that's kind of been the most interesting part of Clemson's sort of roster management to this point is the fact of where you are from a quarterback numbers standpoint, and kind of where the depth chart sits right now. Because currently you have Cade Klubnik, obviously your starting quarterback. You have Chris Vizina, a guy that was a true freshman last year, former high 4-star recruit from the state of Alabama. And that's pretty much it as far as your scholarship quarterbacks are concerned. And so now you're in a position where Trent Pierman is potentially, depending on how that depending on how the spring sort of shakes out, you're in a position where Trent Pierman is your third string quarterback, because you didn't land a quarterback in the 2024 cycle, so you don't have a true freshman guy coming in, and you elected not to bring in somebody from the portal. So now you're kind of in a position, a really weird position, where you don't really have a whole lot of, at least on paper, you don't really have a whole lot of competition going on. And from a number standpoint, you're in some really deep doo-doo if injuries happen. I think that's probably, honestly, beyond offensive line, beyond defensive end, the kind of the two main needs that we've talked about so much this offseason. Quarterback is the position where I've just not really understood what the thought process was, for Clemson, and kind of why they're in the position they are at that spot, because you don't really have anything. And it's not, ideally you want to have at least, at least three scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. And that's still not, that's not great. You'd rather have at least, you rather have four, but three, you at least can manage. But now you're sitting at two. And so, this is no disrespect to Trent Pierman, because he's a guy that has gotten a lot of praise from coaches and people who've viewed practices and stuff like that. But he's not a guy that really you should ever ask to have to come in and play if emergency if injuries happen. Like it shouldn't. The line to him shouldn't be this short. So that's kind of where I'm really concerned, because spring is a time where, things happen, injuries happen. And obviously if you go into the fall with the quarterback depth chart sitting like it is, you're playing with fire. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely playing with fire. And, one of the big things is, injuries do happen, and you look at a guy like Cade, and he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not Trevor Lawrence, 6'6", guy that can take some hits. That type of player. He's a more slender guy. He's a more slight build type guy, and you're really one hit away. Now that hit won't come in spring practice, obviously, but again, you're kind of banking on obviously we've talked at length about Cade Klubnik so far this season, right? And how much development that needs to take place this offseason. So your second guy in line is obviously going to be 5-star redshirt freshman Chris Vizina, right? So you're assuming that he's also going to take a big jump. Again, it doesn't give you great feelings or this great sense of confidence that your 1 and 2 guy are both guys that need to vastly develop this offseason, right? You want a little bit more concrete, definite things when it comes to your quarterback depth. And I feel like Clemson doesn't necessarily have that right now. Now, Chris Vizina, you know, former highly recruited guy, has all the tools necessary, all that kind of stuff again. But when they brought him in, they said he would need a year to get ready. So you're assuming that he's made all that growth, right? And then behind them, like you pointed out, there's not a lot. Trent Pierman, obviously we've heard what the coaching staff said about him. You mentioned it. Obviously they said he's a baller. He's a winner. He's a guy that just kind of goes out there and does it. But again, it's a dangerous place to be. You don't like being there. And then I think one of the other position groups that you think about is kind of a defensive end, right? And those depth chart issues. So there's quarterback is one of those ones that's a little bit nerve wracking if you're a Clemson fan, I think. And I don't really. I mean, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong or if you have a different opinion on it, but I don't think we're going to get any more depth in the quarterback room prior to the start of 2024.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I would be very surprised, barring a Hunter Johnson, Paul Tyson type shows up again.
Yeah,
just the chances of that happening 3 off seasons in a row, where you get a guy that just is like, oh, I just want to come in and coach, and I'll be here. But but I've played a lot of football, and I'll be here if you need me to. Like,
Chase Bryce got any eligibility left? Can we call him up?
I wish. I don't. And I guess to be fair, I mean, Chase Bryce was a guy that came in, similar to, kind of how like a Hunter Helms did or Trent Pierman did. So and he developed into a capable backup, and obviously we saw what he did when Clemson did end up needing him. But ideally, you just don't want to be in that situation, and so now you're kind of in a tough spot. But that's the reality of the situation. And if you get to a point where you have to go into your quarterback depth, it's just kind of where you are. So you're not going to get any help until, if you're not going to go in this offseason and get help, you're gonna have to wait till Blake Hebert comes in next year. So we'll see. But I think beyond quarterback and defensive end, I think really the biggest question for me is center.
Yeah, man.
That position is, we're at a point where it's anybody's guess.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a bunch, but obviously losing a guy, an established starter, multi-year starter like Will Putnam.
Yep.
You're in a position where, I mean, you're breaking in a new center against Georgia again. I mean, it's not ideal, and which is why, I mean, you would have to be breaking in a new center anyway. But now it's a guy that hasn't really played any snaps at center at the college level, which is why it would have been so awesome if Clemson was able to land somebody this portal cycle. But now you're kind of in a position where, well, got to hope whoever you either get somebody in the spring window, or you hope to God that you have some answer there. Who was it? In 2021, it ended up, you were breaking in a new center, ended up being Matt Bockhorst that first game. And obviously that was a mixed bag. And I thought he got better. I thought he got better, throughout the year. And I think I think he got all ACC honors by the end. But that first game was brutal.
It's rough.
And so you might be in a position where it's a similar circumstance, whether it's, Ryan Linthicum, the guy you brought in to hope to eventually be that next in line at center, but again, haven't seen a lot of him, and we don't know how ready he is. Or Harris Sewell is a guy that I've been heard talked about a lot because he played center in high school. But you don't have a whole lot of answers right now.
Yeah,
it's not very clear. So that's
Clemson for sure doesn't have any, answers that have played, like you said, any meaningful college snaps when it comes to the center position. You would think a guy like Ryan Linthicum, that's the first guy that comes to mind when I'm thinking about replacing a Will Putnam. But center is such an important piece of the offensive line and such a pivotal piece. Those are kind of the anchors for the offensive line. Those are kind of the guys that typically are your leaders, your guys that keep everybody together. They're there helping to, call out certain looks and fronts and blitzes and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot to the center position. And, you think of a guy like Ryan Linthicum, former 5-star, highly recruited guy. He sat in the program for, I think, 3 years now. Is he going to be able to come in and kind of, obviously not seamlessly transition, because that rarely, if ever, happens, but step in and really step up in a big way. But again, you mentioned, who do we got week 1 coming in 2024? It's going to be Georgia week 1. There's no warm-up game. There's no game to kind of work out the kinks, if you will. It's going to be, here we are playing a big-time college football team, a team that would have made it to the college football playoff this past year and possibly won it if it wasn't for Alabama in the SEC title game, right? So, you really need a guy like Ryan Linthicum or even a guy like Harris Sewell, which, Harris Sewell got, a fair amount of snaps this season. He saw some playing time this season, and it was, as you would expect from a true freshman, it was a mixed bag. He had some really good moments. He had some really bad moments. But he definitely showed promise. Obviously, it's an accomplishment to just get on the field consistently as a true freshman at the offensive line position. So that's definitely a big position that, obviously we're going to learn more about as the spring moves along, and who's taking those first team snaps, who's taking those second team snaps, how are they looking, how confident is the coaching staff with what they're seeing. And, if I had to point to one thing that kind of gives me a little bit more confidence, is we got Matt Luke. And I think we could not, in my opinion, have made a better hire for this offensive line, because me and you have both stated it in the past numerous times. This offensive line is not devoid of talent whatsoever.
Right.
They just, for whatever reason, have not been developed to the players that they could be based off of their talent. There's a lot of 5-star guys. I know people, that stars only matter during the recruiting cycle, and as soon as you sign them, everybody forgets about the stars that they have with them. Rightfully so, because you haven't done anything on a college football roster yet, right? But if you go back and look at some of these dudes, these were highly recruited guys, especially in the last few recruiting cycles for the Clemson offensive line. So we have talent there. Now I believe we have, without a doubt, the guy in the room that will develop those guys into the players that they could potentially be. So I'm going to hold out hope that that Matt Luke can figure it out for us and get it done, because I think he's got some talent to work with.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and I think Matt Luke is a guy that will get the most out of these guys. It's just a matter of how quickly can he get them ready.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to center, and center is such a difficult position, guys. Like there's so much responsibility and so much of the offense that kind of the things that go into making an offensive play successful. A lot of that has to do with the center. because if you're losing at center, it's really hard. It's really hard to do anything. Like, you need your center to be able to be pretty much on point, from at a very consistent level, in order to be a functional offense. Because when you're losing at center, everything else, it makes everything else just that, a million times more difficult. Whether whether it's the run game or the passing game. I mean, you have to be able to win up front at center. And so when you couple that with all of the responsibilities that a center has beyond, just being able to snap the football correctly, as far as, understanding protections. Sometimes you're calling them, and I believe that's kind of what Clemson has been doing as of late. That makes things that much more difficult, and it puts a lot more on your plate. And so now you're going to be putting that on somebody who has not taken meaningful snaps at center at the college level yet. And so that's the difficult thing. But that's what we brought in Matt Luke to be able to do. That's kind of what his job description is. So kind of is what it is. We'll see if you can get a guy. I still think if you can get a guy, an experienced guy at center, out of the portal, if that opportunity presents itself, that would be preferable. But
yeah,
if not, you have to be able to get these guys ready.
Yeah, and look, that would definitely make us feel better as fan bases, to get somebody out of the portal. But again, that may not happen. So you got to trust Matt Luke. You got to trust his ability to evaluate the talent and put the pieces in that are going to give Clemson the best chance to win. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to throughout this spring practice, and then heading into summer workouts and into fall camp. Is I really want to see 5 guys that work as a team, man. Work in unison, work as just a cohesive group that can really sit back and trust each other and know what each other's going to do. Because I think that's really been part of the problem on the Clemson offensive line, is there's been such this musical chairs type of environment where you never know who's going to be in, who's going to be out. Some of that's been due to injury. Some of that's been due to inconsistent play. But again, when you don't know who's going to line up to the left or the right of you, it makes it very difficult to do your job as well. Because if there's any position group on the football field that relies on the group, it's offensive line. The center can't do his job if the left guard is messing up, right? The right guard can't do his job if the center is messing up, so on and so forth. So it's really just, if unlike any other position, it is really a group effort when it comes to the offensive line. And we have to develop into a more consistent and a more dominant offensive line. There's just no excuse at a place like Clemson, with the brand that they have in college football, for them not to have these really good offensive line groups. And hopefully we have put that behind us with this most recent coaching hire.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope.
Yeah.
But I think it's certainly a step in the right direction, and I think it's you brought in a guy that seems to be in it for at least a little bit. So
yeah,
and he's a guy that fits what you want to be from a culture standpoint, what you want to do from. I mean, the guy has seen it all, and so he had a ton of experience in the industry, and obviously his recruiting acumen speaks for itself. So I think it's not a matter of if things get better. It's just how fast can you do it in one offseason. That's tough, because offensive line is such a in general, it's just such a developmental position, and when you have guys that haven't really gotten that development, how quickly can you get them ready to play? But again, maybe it's just for some guys, it's just a change in philosophy, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes on, and then then you're good, and you didn't really have to dedicate that much time. It was just a matter of a different voice, and Matt Luke certainly brings a different coaching style than what Thomas Austin did. So we'll see. I just want to. I think the biggest thing is I just want to see this. I want to see this offensive line be kind of be nasty. I think that's one of the things that they just haven't had consistently. I think they don't have the guys that are willing to just knock somebody into the dirt. Because I think so many plays this year, if you just go back, throughout this season, so many games where you could have been a lot more successful offensively. Even if you didn't play with perfect technique, where if you came in and to that play with the mentality of I'm going to knock your ass in the dirt, everything changes because offensive line is not so much about playing with good technique is important, but it's a mentality thing as well. And so I think that's something Matt Luke has over his years has done a really good job, and we obviously saw it at Georgia, especially. Those guys are just willing. Those guys are willing to hit. They're willing to run. They're willing to. They're willing to knock somebody into the dirt, and I think Clemson has some guys that can be that. Blake Miller, Walker Parks is obviously a mover and a mauler. Harris Sewell, I think, is a guy that will eventually be that. Colin Sadler, I think, is a guy that has a lot of edge to him. Like if you can get that out of everybody, like whoever you start on the offensive line, if you can get that mentality from the position group as a whole, then I think things will be a lot better for Clemson offensively next year. But it's just a matter of, can you instill that in one off season? That's what it is.
Yeah, 100%, without a doubt. Look, there's with the Clemson team coming back with some of the offensive pieces that we have coming back. You think about a Phil Maffa. If we can get an offensive line that can truly take a jump this offseason, I mean, you think about the things that guy can do. Getting, not splitting the carries, with another kind of 1A, 1B type situation. I mean, look, man, we need that offensive line to develop. The talent's there. It's just got to happen. We got a super chat. IDK James with the $10 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Really do appreciate it. He says Jeff Scott should be OC again. It's developmental, so use the portal. I flew down from Arkansas to watch that farce against Duke. We have better OL and QB. We have to have better OL and QB development. Yep.
I mean, you pretty much summed it up. I mean, I'm not ready to say that we need to make a change at offensive coordinator. I mean, you brought in Garrett Riley for a reason, and I think there are some things that he's done. I think there were things you saw this year that I thought he did a really good job. I really don't think I think this year was the first time in a couple of seasons where I didn't feel like the wide receivers were a problem, and I felt like Garrett Riley did a good job of getting these guys open. And so I think that kind of goes into especially your last sentence about better offensive line and better quarterback development. I think so much of this season could have been a lot different if those positions were a little bit more up to snuff from a consistency standpoint than maybe the wide receivers standpoint. I think schematically, I think Clemson is I think they're doing the right things, but it's just a matter of developing your personnel to be able to execute it at a consistent level. Because I mean, Garrett Riley's scheme it's not overly complicated. I mean, he mixes up a lot of things formationally, but it's a lot of the same plays, just different looks.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's really just about the players being on the same page. It's not. There's not as much thinking as we made it look like there was, at times this year. So that's really the biggest thing. But obviously, yeah, it's developmental, and that's where I think most of Clemson's issues have lied, and not necessarily just not using the transfer portal. Like I don't think Clemson lost 4 games this year because they didn't use the transfer portal. There were a lot of things that have kind of built up over the last few seasons beyond the transfer portal that led to this, how we got to this point. And so now I think Clemson has taken the steps to sort of address that from a coaching standpoint. So we'll see, how much that pays dividends this year.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, my bad, James. Alaska. I got it. But
I didn't even people. You said Arkansas, and I just went
I
along
didn't.
with it. And
I didn't even.
I'm pretty good with
I
with
know.
state abbreviations too. So
Yeah,
that's on me too. But yeah,
I usually am, but not that one. But yeah, man. Look, development is, in my opinion, always been Clemson's. That's been Clemson's issue so far the past couple seasons. It's been development issue. We're not devoid of talent. We have, tons of talent on the roster. It's got to be put in the right situations. It's got to be developed. And that was, you kind of alluded to it, but Garrett Riley said as much this season when when kind of pressed by the reporters, like, "Hey, man, why's your offense not look anything like it did against or not against TCU, but when you were at TCU?" And what did he say? Personnel's not the same. He basically told you these guys aren't capable right now of running what I like to run. And you saw that especially along the offensive line as we went later into the season. What did we do? Clemson kind of reverted back to that inside zone type blocking scheme that they've always liked to do. Whereas Garrett Riley likes to get those dudes pulling, get them on the edge, get them out in space, and getting the offense flowing in that way. But early on in the season, it was very evident that last year's offensive line was not capable of doing that. So they had to kind of adjust fire, revert back, do some of the old things for the sake of we just have to win games, which is what they
yep.
did. So kudos to them for making that adjustment and just understanding, like, hey, there ain't no use in keep trying to do this stuff. It's not going to work.
I mean,
So
and that takes a lot of humility from an offensive coordinator standpoint, because that's hard to do, and it's hard to implement that.
yeah,
And obviously, you go into a season having an idea of what you want to be offensively, and it's difficult, as a coach to see your team not be able to, they're not what you thought they would be, and they're not able to do it the way that you thought they would be. And so that, it takes a lot of humility to be like, okay, this isn't working. We gotta do something else. This team needs to win football games. And I definitely appreciate that. And they didn't do it permanently. I thought,
right.
especially in the bowl game, I thought they did a good job of kind of getting back to what Garrett Riley wants to be, especially from a run game standpoint. They did a lot more gap scheme stuff,
Yep.
And a lot more of their traditional counter. So now it's at a point where, can you take some of the missteps that you had in sort of the preparation process heading into last season, and kind of fix that, and kind of get these guys to a point where they understand, what they need to be offensively, and what the goal is offensively, and it has to be, and obviously you have to be able to coordinate with the new position coaches, Matt Luke well, especially, and kind of what you kind of, your staff has to be on the same page in that way. So that's the biggest thing for Garrett Riley, that and making sure Cade takes those next steps in his development, like we talked about last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, man, I think we'll be okay. There's obviously a lot of development that has to happen this offseason, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, at quarterback, at offensive line, even at receiver. But again, I think that the pieces for the most part are in place for that to happen. It's another offseason under Garrett Riley, getting better, better with his system, better with what he likes to run, learning his play call. So we just gotta trust that the coaching staff's gonna get them spun up. And talking about another new coach to the Clemson coaching staff, Chris Rumpf, over on the defensive end portion of it. And I think this is another big question mark for Clemson fans while we wrap up this depth chart segment that we have going. Let's kind of end with the defensive ends and those guys and what we see heading into spring practice and the 2024 season, because I think rightfully so, there's a lot of question marks when it comes to the depth chart for defensive end in particular, because you are losing a guy in, Justin Maskell. You are losing a guy in Xavier Thomas. You are losing, a guy in Ojebwe who kind of stepped away and transferred out, right? So you're losing some depth there in Ojebwe, and then two guys that were played starter reps for the entire season in 2023. So
Yep.
really the only proven guy that you have that has actually taken meaningful snaps for Clemson in 2023 is true freshman TJ Parker, will be true sophomore next year. So that's your one proven production guy coming back as far as the defensive end group goes. You got some talent there. You got a Cade Denhoff. You got
AJ Hoffler,
AJ
Zaire Patterson,
Hoffler, Zaire Patterson. You got your new dudes in Mayo and all those guys coming in, the Twin Towers,
Jaheim
if you will.
Lawson. Yeah, I
Jaheim
mean,
Lawson, you
you have some
got
names.
you got plenty of talent there. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about before about the transfer portal. It's going to really be on Chris Rump to get in there, really evaluate what he has at the defensive end group, and then if you have some scholarships open up later on after spring practice, maybe he goes out and gets a guy to kind of contribute and help TJ Parker out. Or maybe they're in the room and maybe they've just been, underdeveloped, or they just haven't been responding to that voice that was in the room. And now, suddenly Chris Rump walks in and they respond to a new voice. He is a pretty intense coach. He demands, a certain level of kind of production and effort and motivation on the field, as you saw early on in bowl prep when the reporters kind of caught him over there laying into a couple dudes with some lazy drills that
Yep.
he felt that they were doing, and some poor effort that they were putting in practice. So you obviously got a guy in there that's pretty intense. He's going to be very demanding on his players, and I think that's what you need. You need a guy like that in Chris Rump to come in and transform that defensive line, that defensive end group back into a group that we recognize, that Clemson was kind of known for through their big playoff run, was known for these defensive end guys and these defensive line guys that just kind of, mauled these offensive linemen and really created problems for, the opposing quarterbacks. And that's not really been the case. That production has fallen off quite a bit over the past few seasons. So we need Chris Rump to come in and really kind of flip the script when it comes to this defensive end group.
Yeah, absolutely. And IDK James with the 50 burger. Whoo!
God dang.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you, brother.
Whew, that's a winner right there. He says, I think one issue is, though, if we have a drop off, we will start losing the talent. Plus, recruits do look at draft development so far. All has slid down the board. We just have to do better, like when we pumped out first rounders. Thanks for the content. Well, and James, I think there's a lot of validity to that. I mean, obviously, recruits. At a certain point, you can't just rest on your laurels from a recruiting standpoint and kind of what you've done in the past, because the farther and farther you get removed from that it makes it more difficult and it holds less and less weight. So I mean, I think you're absolutely right that you want to kind of get back to putting out the high end talent that Clemson used to do on the offensive side of the football, and so I think the thing is that I think you have guys in the room right now on offense that can eventually be that. And you have guys coming. You certainly have guys coming in, especially these last two cycles, that can be that. So I think it's a matter of I think you just have to give it time. And I think especially from a lot of talk about the wide receiver standpoint, and obviously offensive line is a major concern. But I think from a wide receiver standpoint, you haven't put out a first rounder since. Ooh, who was your last? Was it Mike Williams?
Wide receiver?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would have been Mike. It
T.
would.
Higgins was the first pick of the second round.
Yeah, he was
He
second
should have
round.
been a first rounder.
He
But
should have been. It should
I
have
kind of
been. It
want to
should have
discount
been.
him.
It should have been T. Higgins, but I think you're right. I think it was Mike Williams was the last first rounder.
Yeah, it's been a minute, and obviously you haven't had a wide receiver drafted at all since Amari Rogers and Cornell Powell back in the 2021 draft. So I do think you have to be able to you kind of have to get back on point with putting out, even if it's not even first round talent, just putting guys in the draft. I mean, and seeing those guys get drafted. I mean, I think you started to see it a little bit more. I think you're going to start seeing it a little bit more from an offensive line standpoint. Obviously, I'm high on the Matt Luke hire. We all are, and I think defensively, you're still doing a good job at putting out quality talent. So it's really just about developing these guys, and a lot of it just has to do with being productive on offense again. I think there are a lot of, if you were more productive back in 2022. I think if you had a better season offensively, maybe a guy like Joseph Ngata gets drafted. I think he had the raw ability to at least be I don't know, mid-round pick. Obviously, he didn't develop into we thought, coming in out of high school, we thought he was going to be a bona fide first, second round pick, and it just didn't happen that way. But he still could have been, a mid-round draft pick, late round pick. So it's about just getting back to that draft pedigree is important. But I don't think the issue is talent, as we keep saying. So I think just being, if this team looks more explosive on offense next year, there will be guys on the offensive side of the football that will get drafted and potentially high. If Adam Randall has a breakout 2024, he's a first, second round pick. I think he is. So I mean, and at the end of the day, it doesn't. I want to make sure I put this correctly. It doesn't necessarily have to be the. You don't have to be like what wide receiver. I don't think you have to get. It'd be nice to get back to that. But I think just even being a quality producer of really, and it's not even just wide receiver, but offensive talent.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I think that changes sort of the outlook. And so again, there's guys in the room that I think on the offensive side of the ball that can play. Beyond wide receiver, I think Phil Maffa is a guy that can get drafted. Jake Brenningstool is a guy that can get drafted.
Yes.
Obviously, Antonio Williams is going into his junior season. If he has a big year, who knows? I still see him as more of a 4-year guy, but I think he has some NFL upside, and then I've gone on and on about Adam Randall and kind of his potential, and I thought he sort of came on at the end of the year. But if Adam Randall ultimately has the most. I think he has the most first round quality traits to him of anybody on offense, just because if he has a rare combination of the athletic standpoint, the size standpoint, and when he's confident in what he's doing, he can really run.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has that kind of potential. So
he's got to put it together on the field.
Yeah, he's got to put it together. I mean, these are guys, and Isaac Smith, says it in here. He says all those guys were highly ranked too. Yeah, I mean, and again, it's not all about rankings, but you watch them and you see it's like, okay, that these guys have the raw ability. I don't think all of these guys were missed evaluations.
Right.
Some of it is just it's a collectively, developing from an offensive standpoint. And you bring in Garrett Riley to bring new life into the scheme. And obviously this first year didn't go how we wanted it to, but I still think there's a lot of growth potential for next year.
I think you saw improvements that you can be excited about going forward, though. I don't think it wasn't an entire loss. for the first year under Garrett Riley and his new system. There were obvious growing pains that happened. I think maybe a little bit more than we anticipated as fans, just because we were just so excited to have him and the type of offense that he ran that we thought it was just going to be, this naively, we thought it would be a more seamless transition. And clearly there were growing pains and issues that arose as the season went on. But I think one of the big things is you saw him adjust mid-season. You saw him adjust his scheme to just win games. He'll continue to do that. And, another year in the system, these wide receivers are going to continue to develop. I think the wide receiver group this time next year will look a whole lot different as far as the opinion of fans of Clemson and fans of other teams look at them. The talent's there. Some of those dudes just got to, like you say with Adam Randall, put it all together on the field. Some of those dudes have to stay healthy, like an Antonio Williams, right? So if it all falls right and kind of gets put together, it'll be a much different looking offense, I think, in 2024 than it was in 2023.
And when we didn't even mention, how the true freshmen coming in, TJ Moore, Bryant Westcott, like those guys have potential first round,
real deal, man. Yeah.
Well. So, and
they both should be 5 stars.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's criminal that TJ isn't, but that's a conversation for another day. And IDK James with another one. Good Lord, you are loving up on us, man. We really appreciate the generosity. Seriously.
Appreciate it, man.
This is dope. He says, I'm from South Carolina, obviously a huge Clemson fan, played at West Georgia. I know about West Georgia. So hesitant to criticize, but I just think we aren't leveraging our success. I don't want to fire Dabo. In my opinion, he should be able to stay as long as he wants. Watch your mouth. No. Just a funny little typo. Yeah. But no, I agree. I wouldn't say that we're not leveraging our success. I don't know how you could. I don't think that's the issue. I think Clemson has done a good job of leveraging its success. I mean, hell, we just lost 4 games, this year, and still brought in, we're still beating out top programs for high quality, athletes. I mean, yeah, lost 4 games and beat out Georgia for their number 1 linebacker target. Like, I mean, last year, you lost 3 games, beat out Alabama for, a guy right in their backyard in Peter Woods. I mean, I think this program is still obviously very capable of recruiting at a high level and from that standpoint. So, but it's really just about. I think you could say that they haven't really leveraged their success in the transfer portal. And I think that may be a different kind of discussion. But I think overall, I don't think the issue is that we're not, we're not utilizing what we've done in the past. And because I think that's something that Dabo of all people has done as well as anybody. He's a guy that'll string off like statistics of all the things that Clemson has done, like the 10-win season stat, that your streak, that he'd love that one. Now it's
over.
That one's over. So now you kind of have to spin it to 9. But however many, it's like he has these memorized. Like it's pretty.
He does. He can spout them off. It's like he listens to an audiobook of just these Clemson stats that are just locked into his head. Yeah. But I think James
probably got them in a notebook somewhere.
Probably. He probably studies them every day. That's his morning reading. But I think James makes a good point as far as Clemson not leveraging their success. I think you could say until recently they haven't leveraged their success when it comes to coaching hires.
And that I think that's an aspect I didn't think of as well. Yeah,
and I think that further kind of explains why Clemson is where it is right now. We made some bad decisions, or Dabo made some bad decisions when it came to hiring certain coaches. Now, he'll never come out and say that, but I think he's obviously made the changes, so he agrees with some of the criticism, obviously, because he made the changes. Up until last offseason, Clemson had gotten to this place where they were, I'm not against promoting from within. There are some fans out there that are completely against from promoting from within. Like, it's a terrible idea. Don't ever do it. I don't think that's the case. Clearly, look at our defensive side of the ball. It worked out with that guy.
Yep.
He replaced Brent Venables. I thought for sure the dude replacing Brent Venables would fall flat on their face just because of the guy they were following. But Wes Goodwin has done anything but that. But I think that's a good point that Clemson has not leveraged their success until recently in hiring new coaches, because as you've seen the past two off seasons, we can kind of, we could pretty much go get
we
relatively
still swing a big stick. Yeah.
Yeah, relatively who we want,
Yeah.
within reason, obviously. But we can go out there and get the big names as well, and as you say, we still swing that big stick. So, we went out and plucked Garrett Riley. We went out and got Matt Luke, who had walked away from the game for a couple years. We went out and got a Chris Rump from the NFL, right? So we're still capable. That brand is capable of going to get very high quality, big name, long pedigree type coaches. And I think if we start doing a little bit more of that, we won't see this development issue that we've been starting to talk about the past 2 to 3 seasons at Clemson.
Absolutely. All right. Do we have anything else?
No, I think that's it. I mean, we can hit on, before we turn it over to the comment section, we can go ahead and hit on the obvious, that Dabo Swinney still is the coach at the Clemson Tigers. I know there was some talk out there of him leaving for his home school, his alma mater in Alabama. That did not happen. If you listen to all the Alabama fans on the internet, typing in every comment section they can find, they didn't want Dabo Swinney. He's the worst coach alive. They would never want him at Alabama. Okay. And to that, as a Clemson fan, I say thank you. I appreciate it. Keep that energy. Next time your job opens up, I want the same energy. I want students outside of Bryant-Denny Stadium marching around, picketing, saying anybody but Dabo again. Okay. I will gladly keep Dabo as my coach, and y'all can say he's the worst coach alive. I don't care.
Yeah.
Alabama did hire, their coach of the future, their replacement of Nick Saban. Obviously wish him the best of luck. That's a tough act to follow, especially when the guy's going to have an office in the building right down the hall. So good luck. And we'll see how it goes, but they are currently bleeding talent. They are currently bleeding players out of the transfer portal right now. So he's got an uphill battle. He's probably got one of, if not the most entitled fan bases, just because of the amount of success that they've had for the past 17 seasons. So I wouldn't want to be that guy. But wish good luck to him, I guess.
Yeah, and he's already finding out, just kind of what the expectations are. I mean, and it's a tough. And listen, I think Kalen DeBoer is a good coach, so I don't think like what's going on right now means that they're doomed for this year. But obviously, it means there's going to be some changes, and obviously they're going to philosophically, there's going to be stuff that they have to figure out. And for the small, the very small contingency of Clemson fans that were thinking, if Dabo leaves, it's not the end of the world, and we'll be okay. Be careful what you wish for, man. I think you're seeing in real time kind of what that would have looked like, in Tuscaloosa. I think if Dabo were to take a different job, listen, there's a reason that Dabo has seen the success he has, and why Clemson is where they are, and how they've been able to build to where they are. And you lose the guy, that the architect behind that. a lot of it comes crumbling down. You're gonna the amount of I could like it makes me almost want to throw up, like thinking like if Dabo had left, just the amount of just the mass exodus, it would have been something to see.
You know what? We would have had a ton to talk about, but man, it would have been depressing over here. It would have been a rough road. But I'm glad Dabo's staying right where he deserves to be. John Sarian said, "This is funny." He said Dabo must lay in bed thinking of how to be quotable. His recent Bama boy Clemson man line was near perfect.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one. That was a pretty good one.
It was hilarious.
Yeah. Hey, it was it hit some heartstrings too. It was a pretty good line. Like, sometimes Dabo will say something and you'll be like, "Oh, brother," yeah. But then like that one, it was like, okay, all right, yeah, that one hit. That one hit. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was a funny one, man. That was a good, and he must, man. Like either he sits in bed and tries to think of these things, or he's just like, maybe he's just a quote guy. Maybe these things just naturally come to him. Like you think back to the Notre Dame game, right? 2015, the Hurricane game, when he was like BYOG, right?
Yeah,
where did that come from, bro?
Yeah.
Like that's crazy.
That's different.
If that was totally off the cuff, man, it's insane.
Yeah, that's an all-time classic right there. Man, IDK James is cooking. It's cooking. Thank you for another $10. He says, "Dumb Alabama fans. I did grad at Auburn, LMAO, but to be honest, I like the Kalen hire." Well, yeah, certainly. Then, yeah, you certainly have seen firsthand kind of the dynamics of that state and that rivalry and obviously Alabama in that fan base. And yeah, I mean, it comes with the territory. They have been the most spoiled any college football fan base has ever been in the history of ever these last 15 years. And so, I'm not going to shed tears, that they're kind of, feeling some hurt a little bit. I don't feel that bad, but I also still, I still have a healthy respect for Alabama as a program, but I thought it's like, oh, you guys were chanting anyone but Dabo and all that, and
look at you now
being stuck up about who you hired. Some wanted to blow up at the Kalen DeBoer hire. I'm like, well, be careful what you wish for. But James, I'm with you. I think the Kalen DeBoer hire is going to pay off because I think, I think it was barring like Alabama going and getting somebody like Kirby Smart or something like that. I think that this was coming down the pipe. This mass exodus. So you need a guy that has been able to work with less, and that's certainly something that Kalen DeBoer has done at every stop he's been at. The guy just wins football games. Will he be able to do it in the SEC? I mean, I think he will. But it's really about, is he, I think there's a baseline of Alabama is never going to be like, really bad under Kalen DeBoer. It's really just about, is he going to be able to get, win national titles? Is he going to, and not even to the level of Nick Saban, but is he going to be able to be at that level consistently, kind of like where, kind of like what Alabama fans expect them to be. So that's the toughest part is the expectations. That's for sure.
Yeah, man, that's gonna be the part where it's gonna be really difficult to be Kalen DeBoer, right? Like those expectations couldn't be higher. And to follow a coach like that, not only a great coach, but the greatest college football coach. Look, man, good luck, because those fans are outside of their mind. Majority of them, at least the ones that type on the internet all the time. So, yeah, I think it's a good hire. I think they did a good job. But again, it's going to be tough sledding for him if he, if he was to go 8-4 or something like that, that fan base might lose their mind, dude. But again, they're not going to have Nick Saban on the sideline anymore, so they have to. You would hope that they give him a little bit of grace following Nick Saban and let him get his program in there, his coaches in there, his culture in there, and continue to build success there. But will they be patient if there's any sort of growing pains or more losses than they would like, which is basically if he loses more than 2 games, they're going to lose their mind.
Yeah. Man, that first 9-3 season is going to be. They might burn the town down.
Bro, Bama fans going to be defecting everywhere. They're going to be like 9-3. What? They haven't seen that in 18 years
over
at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. When is the last time they won? They lost 3 games. Oh, you know what? I think they lost 3 in 2000. Was that 2010? I think they did. But other than that, they haven't done it under Nick Saban. Oh, well, that in his first year.
First year
wasn't that good. But
yeah, so but
Spaceman says Dabo would have fit well at Bama for the most part. Players commit to Saban like they commit to Dabo. Glad he's staying. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, despite what Bama fans would, I think it would have been a good hire for them. But certainly glad they didn't make that decision. IDK James with another $5. Man, it's going crazy. Yeah. He says, he definitely does.
Single-handedly keeping the All In show alive, man.
I know, man. This is nuts.
We appreciate it.
I think he's set the record at this point.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, especially with the $50 one.
Yeah, for sure.
It's cooking. But seriously, we really appreciate that, man. But he says, he definitely does. Remember his response to Spur. Dabo is he does. I know he takes some time sometimes he takes some time rehearsing these in the mirror before he he thinks of them one night or like maybe late at night, and I just imagine him waking up he gets out of bed, like waking up his wife, and like he just goes into their bathroom and just stares at himself in the mirror and practices his lines. It's like it appears to him in a dream one night, and then he just gets up and he's like, I have to memorize this.
Yeah, I have to memorize this. Or either at the breakfast table every morning. Maybe he's just like looking over there and be like, hey, Kath, check this out. And just delivers the line. He's like, what do you think of that one?
BYOG. I think
should I say that one? Yeah. Yes? No? No? Okay. All right. I'm going to say it anyway.
Yeah. Oh, man. We have another super chat from D4. Oh, I think I know who this is. He thank you for the $2 super chat. He says, "My boy J-Bo, great job." I think I know who this is. So that's my man D4.
D4, yeah.
Good to see you, buddy. And thank you for the support. Really appreciate that.
That's what's up, man. Thanks for stopping by.
Let's see, what else are you guys talking about?
Steel Gamble gets in with a $5 super chat. Said,
"What are the odds?" Those didn't even load for me.
What are the odds TJ Moore becomes the next alpha dog at wide receiver? Boy, do we need one of those. Man.
He's a lock. He's a lock. No,
boy, do we need one of those.
Hey, listen, there are no there are no absolutes. There are no guarantees in recruiting. Like it's at the end of the day, high school recruiting is still a crapshoot. Like you'll have a better, your evaluations do matter a ton, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of factors that play into how successful a player is in college. But I think TJ Moore I think he has all the ability. I think he's a guy that'll be a one of the better ones that Clemson has had. I think he's really talented. So I think the odds are pretty high as far as that goes, but I don't want to put a number on it because I don't need somebody clipping me. And if TJ Moore doesn't pan out and be like, yeah, look at this idiot.
As of right now, it looks to be more than promising.
I would be very surprised if he was not a very, very good football player here.
Yeah. He might be wide receiver one by this time next year. We'll see.
Man,
It could happen. It could happen.
Totally
because I do think there is a void at wide receiver one and has been for several seasons at Clemson. And that's been part of the problem in the wide receiving room. So James gets back in with another $10 super chat.
Good Lord. He's
He
got
said
to have $100 by now.
Is requesting money. Dabo, even if he won a natty this year, wouldn't have gone to Bama. I think he is fine with Clemson.
Yeah, I think he said he's fine with Clemsoning. Yeah.
Clemsoning.
Yeah, I mean, he said it himself. He was a Bama boy, but now he's a Clemson man. So I think Dabo. I think if anything, I think Dabo is at this point, I feel pretty comfortable saying Dabo is a Clemson lifer, or at least he's going to leave on his own terms. And I think he's going to, when he decides to hang it up, he will still be at Clemson.
Yeah, I think so because, as much as there was, talk for years and years about Dabo, eventually going back to Alabama, and I think that was a real concern for most of us. I mean, it was a legitimate concern this go around for me when the Alabama job opened up. Like, I didn't think, I was hoping obviously that Dabo wouldn't go, but it wouldn't have surprised me to see Dabo go, just because of some of the recent things that happened, and it is his alma mater, and he does have that history there of winning a national championship as a player and all that kind of stuff. But the more you look back at it, and the more you kind of just step back and look what he's built truly at Clemson, and the changes that have come about at Clemson since he's been the head football coach, and the sports that have been added, and the massive upgrades that have happened to both the academic facilities and athletic facilities at Clemson, and how much of a big part of that is due to his success as the head football coach and Clemson's success as a program. I mean, at a certain point, you got to look at it and be like, why would you leave here, the place that you literally built, the place that you will always be remembered, and kind of go to a place like Alabama or any other place for that matter? It wouldn't make a lot of sense to me. But again, these dudes are motivated by different things, and you can never say never. But at this point, I'm with you. I'm pretty comfortable in the fact that, I don't think Dabo is really going anywhere. I think he'll be at Clemson for as long as he wants to be at Clemson, honestly. So we'll see how long he wants to coach. I think that'll determine, how long he's the head coach at Clemson. I think he'll go out, like you say, on his own terms, and probably stay around. At least some capacity of the school, maybe not the program, but the school.
Man, this is ridiculous, man. This is getting this is nuts. Yeah. IDK James with the hundo. Oh my God, he dropped the Benjamin. Yeah, he said
if I'm not already over 100, I definitely am now.
Yeah,
he threw the Benjamin down on us, man. All kidding aside, dude, seriously, thank you so much. And everybody in here who sent a super chat, it's greatly appreciated. Me and Jordan love doing this show, and your guys' support is obviously greatly appreciated. Because
I forgot that I was hungry doing this show. I haven't even eaten dinner yet.
IDK James bought you dinner, dude.
He bought me that and then some. Good Lord, man.
He bought you dinner. Look at that. You said you were hungry at the top of the show, and he was like, I got you, bro.
Yeah. Head on over to Roos Chris or something. I got you, bro. Oh, man. That seriously, thank you, man. He says, that's the record. I played nickel, so I analyze it from that perspective. But Cade isn't going through his reads at all, checking on one or two. That's something that we've talked a ton about. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And why I don't feel like a lot of Clemson struggles this year were, we complained the last couple of seasons about the wide receiver play. And obviously the offensive line was, a big part of that as well. And I do think the offensive line certainly has a lot of growing up to do. But I think there were a lot of games this year where it really was just, guys are getting open, but Cade not seeing it. He's not throwing with anticipation. Maybe he's not reading the whole field, not letting plays develop at times. And there were a lot of checkdowns. I mean, his average depth of target, I think, was I don't want to get it wrong, but I saw a stat, a chart of all the Power 5 quarterbacks and their average depth of target, and Cade was, when I tell you, it was so bad. It was like he was like the bottom left quadrant of the graph. I can't remember. They were comparing average depth of target, and I think it was catchable ball rate.
Goodness.
And he was in the bottom left quadrant. And so, and obviously the x-axis is increasing from left to right, and the y is increasing from up to down. So if you're in the bottom left quadrant, that means you were bad in both categories.
Yeah.
And so it was rough. I saw it last week, and it kind of ruined like the next 30 minutes for me because I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's the problem. I mean, and I think that ties into what you just said is there's a lot of checkdowns, which it's great that a quarterback knows where his checkdowns are, but when you're an offense that needs to be able to be explosive, because this is not the goal coming into this year wasn't to be a 10, 11 play, work down the field and score, because obviously we saw what happened when this team tried to do that a lot of times.
Yeah, it
this
didn't
team
end
just
well.
can't play that mistake free. They didn't have that in them. A mistake was bound to happen, and now all of a sudden, at best, it's a loss. It's a loss and not a turnover that goes that results in points for the other team. So, that's really the thing that Cade has to mature on the most is trusting his line, which I know at times was hard to do, but trusting his line and trusting that his receivers can go make plays and giving them the opportunity, giving them a chance to go make plays. Because I think that's something, when he did throw the ball, he didn't always put it in the best spot. I remember, I think one play that jumps out to me was that Syracuse game, that deep ball to Adam Randall that he rainbow. It was a moon ball, and and obviously Adam had a whole step on the cornerback, and he had to slow down and kind of try to work his way back, and it ended up a pass breakup when it really should have been a touchdown if you lead him and put that ball in the breadbasket. So that's the thing. He has to be comfortable taking those throws, and he has to he puts so much air under it sometimes.
That's what
makes it difficult.
That's what I was about to say. Especially with his deep balls, he tends to put a lot of air under it. Like, I mean, that thing goes about 1.5 miles in the air, and it's just like, look, man, you don't got to throw it.
And it doesn't have the velocity that you want it to have. Like, that's fine, but if you're going to put it that high, you have to have you have to have the arm strength and velocity for it to go that high and still reach its intended target in the right spot, instead of forcing the receiver to have to work his way back to the ball to try and make a play. And there were so many times this year where the receiver was open, especially on these vertical routes, and the ball is behind him. Like, there's only so much you can do. Like, we don't like this. We shouldn't have to have like freaks at wide receiver to make work back and make those spectacular plays in order to be successful on offense. Like, that's not what this team wants to be. So
and there's players like you said, we pointed out several times this season where there's been players running wide open down the field. Troy Stellato comes to mind a lot, where he was running wide open down the field a lot of times, and Cade just kind of locks on a read, and it's there, it's not there, and he doesn't tend to scan the field and kind of come off of that first read, or at one point in time in the season, it looked like maybe he was only getting one read. Again, who knows where he was at in his development? How much did the coaching staff trust him? Were they telling him, hey, you got one read on this play, and that's all they were giving him as he progressed? But he's got to take that step this offseason. The game's got to start slowing down for him. He's got to start trusting his pocket, like you say, stepping up in the pocket, Running to the sideline is not always the answer when you're starting to feel pressure. Sometimes stepping up in that pocket and delivering a throw is the answer. So, developing it.
When he did that,
Yeah,
it was good. I mean, most of the time. It's just, being comfortable doing that more often and understand, and that comes with, a lot of that has to do with, pocket presence and all that. And just, you kind of have to have an innate feel for where you are and kind of, and be able to work the pocket that way. And that takes reps.
yep.
And I still have belief that he can take those steps, but
Yeah, 100%.
he has to do them, obviously. Man, the super chats are flowing in, man.
Rolling in tonight, man.
Yeah,
We appreciate you guys.
this is a record-breaking night, and we don't even have that many people like in watching the live. So
Usually we got quite a bit more in the live chat, but I mean, we got 37 in here right now, and the super chats are flowing in. So thank you guys so much for
in a lot of our post games, where especially like where we had like hundreds of people in here. Like it wasn't when this. So this is dope. Oops. Almost knocked everything off my desk. That would have been
we'd have been without Jordan for a little bit. All right, Steel Gamble gets in with a super chat and says, Cade looked like a pro in the game-winning drive against Kentucky. Here's to hoping that drive was his growing up party. Absolutely, man. And that's what you have to hope. And look, at the end of the day, Cade's going to be our QB1. He's going to be the starter heading in the next season. Me and Jordan talked about the depth issues from our perspective when it comes to quality depth behind Cade. We talked about the growth that needs to come from Cade this offseason. But if you were to script a better way for Cade and this offense to go into the offseason, you couldn't have scripted it better than that walk-off touchdown drive basically in the Gator Bowl. I mean, an offense that struggled mightily at times where it looked extremely difficult to move the ball on a consistent basis, that made tons of turnovers, tons of mistakes throughout the season. To end it on a drive like that, I think that's the best case scenario for that offense because, that's kind of a snapshot of the good and the bad that happened this season, and hopefully that parlays into a lot more good than bad next season, specifically in the turnover margin. We went an entire season last year. We turned the ball over every single game.
Yep.
We didn't have a single clean game in the turnover margin on the offensive side of the ball, which is absolutely insane. But, there's definitely got to be growth, and hopefully that gave Cade the confidence that he needs to go out there and develop this offseason and come out and lead the Tigers in this 2024 campaign.
Absolutely. And, and I think the biggest thing, that situationally, it was something that the offense hadn't done all year. And I thought that was the coolest thing was they were in a position where they needed to go win the game. Like there were so many times this year, so many games this year where it was like, okay, defense, you're gonna have to make the plays in this one, and we're just gonna have to hang on. We're gonna do what we can, but it's on y'all to make sure we don't lose this one. And for the first time this year, when the offense was asked to go win the game, they went and did it.
Yep.
And so that's about as good as you can ask for. I mean, just like I said, so many times this season, it was the complete opposite. Like, I mean, you look at the Wake Forest game, you look at the Notre Dame game, you look at the South Carolina game.
Yeah.
I mean, your defense basically, kept you in those games. And even really the North Carolina game, the defense gave up yards, but they created opportunities for the offense. And kept them from, especially early in that game. I'll never forget that Nate Wiggins, strip like at the goal line. That was
crazy.
That's one of the greatest plays I've seen from a Clemson player. That was incredible. Like so many times this year, that was the difference in you winning and losing a game. And now
Absolutely.
the offense was the difference.
And the
that
games that the defense couldn't produce plays like that, we didn't win.
Yep.
I saw a stat this week I ran across. I should have took a screenshot of it or something, but it was a stat that said something like 33% of the.
Oh, was it the David Hale? Was it the David Hale?
It might have been, yeah.
I think so. I think I saw that.
33% of the points scored against Clemson's defense came off of either turnovers, missed kicks, block kicks, stuff like that. So basically, a turnover in some form or fashion by the offense resulted in 33% of the points given up by the defense this year. That's an insane stat, dude.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
Which shows you how, like, and that sucks because statistically, this defense doesn't look. I think statistically, like for raw numbers, Clemson gave up like 20 points a game.
Right.
But in that defense was a lot better than
a whole lot better
points a game.
They were put in a lot of bad situations consistently this season, and still produced pretty insane numbers.
I think they were number 1 in defensive success rate, number 2 in defensive efficiency. Like they were top 1, 2, 3, top 5 in almost every defensive category, and gave up 20 points a game. Gave up 20 points a game because of how just the variance in the offensive results was so crazy. And that's, you really couldn't, like, it was almost uncanny, like how unlucky. And at a certain point, you can't say it's unlucky, because if you do it over and over and over again, it's like, well, that's kind of who you are. But
yeah, we were saying after the Duke game, right? Oh, all these fluky turnovers, man, that was crazy. We were inside the 5-yard line on 4 different possessions and came out with no points. But it wasn't fluky, because that continued the rest of the season. At least from the turnover standpoint, it started getting cleaned up later on in the season. We kept turning the ball over, but the defense started creating a lot more turnovers. So it kind of compensated. But again, they weren't fluky, because we continued that streak all season. We turned the ball over in every single game we played in 2023.
Yep.
To include the bowl game.
Pretty unbelievable. Man, we have the super chats are piling up. This is awesome. Thank you guys so much for the support. Man, IDK James, I'm gonna have to. I might have to have a running. You know what we should start doing is kind of like a top donor type of thing, like where we But that would be kind of tough to do, since we don't have a producer. It would be nice to have like a third person like producing the show, so they could do that. But I hope one day we could do something like that.
One day we'll be able to. Hopefully we'll be able to add that to our. It'd be a whole lot easier if somebody was running the ancillary stuff in the background that we try to do while we're talking. So
it's a lot harder to do that, while on air. But that'd be something that'd be cool to do. And I don't know, just kind of we could workshop that. But IDK James, seriously, thank you for another $10. He's dropping, like, pretty soon he's going to pay for my rent. Like,
this man, he got to be up above $200 at this point. Yeah, I'm not joking.
I think he's already covered my car insurance bill for this. So
there you go. See, we appreciate it. The big crew we have here at the All In Show, aka me and Jordan, we really do appreciate it.
Seriously, man. He said, but our quarterback is not helping. I mean, we don't really have a burner receiver. You just shouldn't check on 1 or 2. Most times they go to 3 max, but that's important.
Yeah.
I disagree that we don't have a burner receiver. I mean, I think we have guys that can run. I mean, I think Tyler Brown is one of the fastest players on the team. Obviously, you missed one of them, and Cole Turner being out for the year.
Yeah.
Adam, and like I said, Adam Randall can really fly when he's. I think it's so much of his struggles has been mental and trusting his body after the injuries. Like, I don't think this. I think you're starting to see the makeup of this wide receiver room change. I think Clemson is he's going to has kind of structured the room to be a lot faster. And kind of favoring downfield speed and quickness. It's just a matter of getting those guys the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of been the struggle. And, that's some of that is Cade understanding of, what his reads are, letting plays develop, and offensive line giving him time to throw. There's so much that goes into it. But I think there was a lot more big plays to be had this year that they weren't able to make. And I think if you do hit on those, this season looks different. But that's a what if. But all you can do is look at what you did this year and why those plays weren't successful and make it better. But I don't think it's a personnel issue. I think the personnel is in this offense to be able to be explosive. I don't think you need to. I've seen teams with far less talented rosters offensively that have put up that are able to create explosive plays in the passing game. And so I think just going back and watching these games and seeing, especially on the second, third watch, you see guys, creating separation, getting open, but you have to see them. Like the quarterback has to see them, and offensive line has to execute. You have to, there's so much that has to happen, and then you got to be on time and make the throw. And so, if those things aren't happening, then then it's obviously it's incompletion, turnover, sack, whatever it is. But it's not a big play. But there were opportunities this year that this team missed on. There were so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I don't think schematically, and then why I don't think that Garrett Riley, a lot of the issues this season, I don't think they fall on Garrett Riley, because I think schematically, I think they're doing a lot of good things. And I think when this offense, when the guys have developed and understand what they're doing and their role within the offense, I think they'll be able to score points and score a lot of them. But you got to execute, and that's what they said. That's what the coaching staff has said, and maintain. It's an execution thing. And so obviously that falls on the coaches as well, of course, because you have to make sure that your guys are ready. But that's the reason. It's not because you're not doing the right things offensively. Man. Whew. All right, I want to hit you. We might have to speed through these so we can end the show, because you guys are going crazy. But we greatly appreciate it. IDK James with another $20. Man, he's cooking. He says, was a D2 level player but could jump some of our routes. Makes no sense. I think I'm missing the context on this one. You don't have to send another super chat if you don't want to, but you can put it in the comments. Kind of expand on that. I kind of missed the context on that one, because there's so many of them now. Like you guys are sending these super chats like at a different point in the conversation, and then when we get to them, I'm completely lost. Big John with the $10. Good to see you, man. He says, you can't sleepwalk into next year's opener. No, you certainly can't.
That's for certain.
That's the last thing you can do.
Yeah, you sleepwalk into there, and let's just say you saw what happened to Florida State. And it was brutal. It could have been worse.
Oh yeah, it could have been. I think Georgia was at their goal line or something when that game was over.
Yeah, they could have put up 70 on them easily. But no,
I was hoping. The selfish part of me was hoping they put up 70, because who holds the record in the Orange Bowl.
I wasn't even going to talk about it. I'll be honest. I'm pretty irritated at Georgia for doing us like that. First of all, they embarrassed the ACC championship on live television, and then they took a slight shot at Clemson. They were like, "No, guess what, Clemson? Yeah, you still hold the record for the worst loss in Orange Bowl history.
At least the most points given up. They definitely got the margin of victory.
They got the margin of it, but the most points given up in the history of it. So, Georgia, I'm just saying that was kind of disrespectful. You didn't have to do it.
I mean, you could have because at that you were already disrespecting. There's no harm by punching it in one more time. one or
you
two
know,
more times. Just I
yeah,
mean, I
just
mean, even if you just tied it, but
yeah, just score a couple more touchdowns for us. Why? How hard could it have been? You know, come on,
they weren't stopping you.
help us out, help us out. But no, you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that. So whatever. Uh, it is what it is. But no, we can't sleepwalk into that game. We kind of saw how that game was a tone setter in DJ's first year as a starter at Clemson. Right? We went into that game 10-3 game in Charlotte against Georgia, and Clemson kind of stumbled through the rest of the season, never really getting their footing fully. Um, and so it's definitely a game of importance that you have to absolutely go into and be ready, man. Like I said, there's no warm up game. There's no you know there's no little FCS team or Division II team or whatever to kind of warm up and work out the kinks. It's going to be into the grinder game one. So
Yep.
we'll see how it works out. I got confidence that the coaching staff will get them ready.
Jeremiah's Payne, thank you for the $5. He says this is also the first time we ran a brand new scheme. We've been using chat system for 10 years, and I think that's
true.
That's a valid point. It hasn't been Chad's system for 10 years, but a lot of the core principles of what Clemson did offensively when Chad Morris was the coach carried over into the Jeff Scott, Tony Elliott, Brandon Streeter years, and so just the core of that offense of the Clemson offense hasn't changed very much over a decade. And so now you bring in Garrett Riley, and there are things that he does that carry over, but a lot of the core principles, like Clemson was primarily zone blocking, inside zone. Sometimes some years it was outside zone, but their bread and butter was was zone running schemes, and and a lot of heavy RPO usage. Garrett Riley uses a lot of RPOs as well, but a little bit differently. It was just a different offense, and so now you're finally. I mean, these guys have been coached up in the quote unquote Clemson offense. Some of these guys that have been here 3-4 years, and now you're asking them, all right, and it's something we kind of underrated going into last season. We thought maybe the scheme change would be because of the simplicity of Garrett Riley's offense. It would make things easier, but it's some of the basic fundamental things are different from what you did beforehand, and so now you're asking these guys to kind of change their how they've known to do things, even if it's on the surface not complicated. You've trained your body, you've trained your body, you've trained your mind on how things are supposed to be done, and now you're asking your body to acclimate itself to a completely different way of doing things.
Yep.
And so that's the difficult part. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that. It was a bigger learning curve than we thought it was going to be, and I think some of that goes hand in hand with flat out these guys weren't necessarily being developed to the best of their ability to begin with, and so now when you're putting that change on them, they're not really well equipped to make that transition seamless, and so that's especially along the offensive line, and that makes things difficult. All right. This has got to be the last one because we got to get on out of here. We're almost we've hit over the 2-hour mark. Thank you, IDK James. He decides to drop another one.
Another $10 super chat to send us off, riding out into the sunset tonight. Says, to be frank, if you don't execute, that's coaches.
Yeah.
I just see film and know what they're going to do. They need more motion, etc. Your defensive reads are too easy against us.
And I think one of the main reasons, I I agree that if these players, it's ultimately on the coaches to get these guys ready, and if they're not
Yep.
executing, like they have to fix that. As far as using more motions and stuff like that, I mean, I think Clemson did a pretty fair amount of motion. Like it was a lot. I think they could be a little bit more creative because it seemed like it was motion Tyler Brown across the formation and then run the football. And there's it forces the defense to think, and it kind of freezes linebackers. But when you dress it up the same every single time, you kind of especially situationally, teams kind of start to pick up on that. But one of the reasons, from my experience, when teams kind of go away from motion is because it does installing motions is a difficult thing. I didn't play much football, and I played defensive back when I did, but from an offensive standpoint, installing motions, you don't want to install motions if it's going to confuse, because there's no point in trying to confuse the defense if you wind up confused yourselves.
Yep.
And so I think, now I don't know for sure that that's what's happening and all that, and why they're not doing more different stuff as far as motion. Like we didn't see a ton of orbit motion and stuff like that, or motioning out to the boundary or field. Like there wasn't a ton of that. There was you saw a lot of the same types of motion.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason you haven't seen a ton of diversity there is because you have a quarterback that still is developing and learning and understanding what he's supposed to be doing in the offense. And if he's confused, then everybody else is confused. And you don't want to, there's no point in doing all that if it makes things harder for you to execute what you're trying to do. Because it doesn't matter if the defense is confused if you don't know what you're doing either. So that's the toughest part. But I agree that execution was a lot of the, and it's kind of a simple concept, but a lot of the execution, a lot of the issues this year was obviously execution, whether it was from the quarterback, offensive line, not so much the receivers. There were times, but it was really quarterback and offensive line were the main culprits for why plays weren't successful.
Absolutely.
So you just have to be able to get on the same page there. And I think once, if Cade takes that next step in his development, if the offensive line takes the next step into your development, you'll start to see the offense.
I think you will
open up, and things you'll see more different things.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to get more creative with how you dress things up, because everybody's still, it doesn't matter what you're doing, pre-snap, because everybody understands what's happening post-snap. And once you get to that point is when the offense, blossoms, because now you can ask them to do pretty much anything as long as you keep the core principles the same. They understand what's supposed to happen, and you can do things to confuse the defense and make things look different. And now that's how you create, it's not just your wide receiver winning one-on-one. You're creating busted coverages and missed assignments that create easy yardage. And that's what this offense and what Garrett Riley at his previous stops has done really well at. And so when you get to that point, that's when I think you'll start to see the results start to show. And that's why I don't think, I think giving Garrett Riley time is obviously the best option. And I'm not, selling my stock on him yet, but he does have to prove it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think Clemson will get there. And, James brings up another good point. Motion helps identify the defense. It absolutely does tip the defense's hands and stuff like that. But again, the quarterback's got to feel comfortable in the system, and everybody's got to know what's going on. And I think we will hopefully start to get a little bit closer to that point this coming off season, as they get into year 2 under Garrett Riley and understanding a lot more of what he expects and what he wants it to look like. One of the big things for me this season was I'd like to see a lot more of those jet sweeps that they ran with Tyler Brown.
Yeah, we would always fake, like
they always hit, dude.
Like we were going to do it, and we almost never did it. Which is why I was like, You're
And
like,
the
okay, well,
few,
at a certain point, I mean, I get you're setting it up, but if you set it up but don't do it, then what's the point?
yeah, yeah. And the few times that they did do the jet sweep, it hit.
Yeah.
It hit pretty good.
Tyler Brown can run, man. You saw it.
The
He
few
was he
times that
wasn't
they,
even 100% in that game.
yeah, and
So
I think you could do that with a couple of the other guys too. Troy Stelato's a guy that could do that. Cole Turner's a guy that can do
yep.
that. You can mix that up, man. You can
Antonio
make
Williams.
you Antonio Williams could absolutely do it. Like you got dudes back there that could absolutely do it. You could even do it with a guy like Jay Haynes. You know the speed that dude's got,
Yeah.
right? So you got speed on that offense that you could take advantage of and get people out on the edges and make that defense go sideline to
Side to side,
sideline a
yeah.
little bit more and cover a lot more ground than you're asking them to cover without those type plays. So there's a lot of room for growth, a lot of stuff that can happen, and hopefully we start to see those changes. And it starts up front first and foremost, and then it starts with quarterback development. And if those two things develop like they need to this offseason, I truly believe this offense will look a whole lot different than they did in 2023. This offense has the ability to be a really, really dangerous group. But again, there's a lot of pieces that have to develop, and then there's a lot of pieces that have to kind of mesh together for that to happen. So a lot easier said than done. But luckily for us, the talent is there, and I believe the coaches are there now as well, at least for the most part. So, but I think with that, we'll go ahead and end the show, Jordan. We've been on here for 2 hours and 15 minutes. I want to go ahead and thank everybody in the live chat right now. We got 37 people watching in the live chat. I want to thank every single individual who participated in the live chat, commented, contributed to our conversation here. That's what it's really all about for me and Jordan. Yeah, we come with a certain portion of the show that's planned on topics that we want to address and talk about. But really what I look forward to is at the end of the show where we kind of just turn to the comment sections and let you guys drive the show from there. So thank you guys so much for showing up and contributing in that way. Thank you so much for the people that sent a super chat tonight. IDK James sent so many I can't even count. So appreciate you for supporting the show. D4 got in here and sent a super chat and supported. Steel Gamble got in here and sent a couple super chats. Thank you so much, man. Really do appreciate it. Big John got in here. Jamarius Payne got in here. Thank you to everyone who sent a super chat, and even and including those who didn't send super chat. If you just got in here and commented, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. All of that is helping support this channel and helping support the All In Show, which is what me and Jordan do here on the channel. So thank you guys so much for showing up. IDK James gets in here with one last one to send us out. Thank you so much, man. You guys keep showing up. And obviously we do this show every Thursday at 7 p.m. Me and Jordan are right here chopping it up about Clemson football, college football. Jordan, send the people off.
Yeah, guys. I mean, he pretty much covered it, but seriously, thank you guys for tuning in each and every week. This is, it's been a dream of mine to, be able to cover Clemson football and then do it in a YouTube format. And, just these past couple of seasons have been really awesome. So, seriously, we really thank you guys for the support. And, I think I speak for both of us. We're really proud of, what the community we built here, and hope to continue to grow it, and hope you guys continue showing up. So once again, thank you guys, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody be here right here next Thursday, 7 p.m., same bat time, same bat channel. Yes, Cade Klubnik enthusiasts, we will be eating good tonight. Thank you guys for all the support. Until next time, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. See you guys next Thursday. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.